A warm welcome to another edition of Diplomatic Channel. I'm Amarachi Ubani. This week on the program, we're turning the spotlight again on the Nigerian Immigration Service and the validity of the Nigerian passport for dual citizenship holders when exiting the country. Back in December, the Nigerian Immigration Service announced that Nigerians abroad can return home with their expired passports. It also directed airlines to admit such categories of people, saying the decision was aimed at making life easy for Nigerians in the diaspora. A statement signed by the Assistant Controller General of the service, MCDK, says, consequent upon the above, all entry-exit points are, by the copy of this letter, directed to open a help desk for all Nigerians in this category and directed the same to passport officers where their passports will be reissued within a maximum of 2 weeks. This is good news for Nigerians who want to return home, but whose travel plans have been hampered by the inability to renew their passports. Speaking of which, you notice the last part of the statement I just read. It says all entry points are by copy of this letter directed to open a help desk for Nigerians in this category and directed the same to passport officers where their passports will be reissued within a maximum of 2 weeks. Well, meaning that you're guaranteed of your entry into Nigeria, but upon your arrival, you're expected to apply for a renewal of the passport while you're here. And this is the part that's been confusing for many Nigerians resident in foreign countries and who are being detained at the airports for not having a valid Nigerian passport, despite returning to the country on an expired passport. Perhaps our guest on the program, Dayo Shotinwa, a U.S. immigration lawyer, can help clear some of the confusion here. That interview comes up in a short while. In the meantime, taking a peek at other global issues, Israel is still insistent on entering the last peaceful stronghold in Gaza, Rafah. And that's because Israel believes that hostages are being held there. That may be more imminent now as Hamas fighters reportedly fired rockets from within the Strip, causing the Israeli Defense Forces to close the Kerem Shalom crossing with Gaza. The crossing is one of the few routes to get humanitarian aid into Gaza. That attack happened over the weekend as mediators in Egypt held talks to broker a ceasefire and to release Israeli hostages. Israel has said it will not accept Hamas's demands to end the Gaza war. According to Israeli Defense Forces, 10 projectiles were fired from an area near the Rafah crossing into southern Gaza, located approximately 3.6 kilometers from Kerem Shalom. This has strengthened the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's resolve not to accept a deal with Hamas and for the war to continue despite rising protests against it. We'll be returning to this in a moment as well. But first, here's a quick check on other discussions in diplomatic circles. The Nigerian government, represented by the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Adamu Lamua, has signed the Treaty on Conservation and Sustainable Use of Marine Biology Diversity of Areas Beyond National Jurisdictions. The ceremony took place at the treaty signature room of the United Nations headquarters in New York under the supervision of the Chief of the Treaty Section, Mr. David Nanopoulos. Adopted on June 19, 2023 by the Intergovernmental Conference on Marine Biodiversity of Areas Beyond National Jurisdiction, convened under the auspices of the United Nations, the agreement is a third implementing agreement to the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has pledged further support for Palestine, claiming that Western countries, and the United States in particular, are panicked over ongoing pro-Palestine sit-ins in universities. During an address during the Central Committee of the Al-Ba'ath Party in Damascus on Sunday, the president said, "When we view the brutal crackdown, which we perceive as unprecedented in American, French and German universities, alongside any anti-protests or pro-Gaza rallies. But the basic goal is not necessarily Israel, even though it is the West protege. In fact, this repression, which we perceive as unprecedented, is in general a reflection of panic in the Western systems. President al-Assad also criticized the Turkish position on the Palestinian crisis, saying the Turkish President Recep Erdogan verbally attacks Israel and supports it with actions. Finally, Israeli security forces detained the Greek consul's guard as thousands of Orthodox Christians were celebrating the Holy Fire ceremony at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in East Jerusalem over the weekend. Greece's main opposition Syriza party has demanded an explanation from the Foreign Ministry over the incident. Considered one of the holiest places in Christianity, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is in occupied East Jerusalem. It is of great importance to Christians who believe that Jesus Christ was crucified there and then ascended to heaven. Welcome back. A couple of weeks ago, a video made the rounds on social media of one YouTube vlogger who was detained by the Nigerian Immigration Service over the validity of her Nigerian passport. She'd observed the NIS directive on being allowed to enter the country with her expired Nigerian passport and being a dual citizen, presented her other passport upon exit. The immigration officials insisted she had to have a valid Nigerian passport as well to exit the country. Now, opinions vary as to how the officials and the vlogger should have handled the case, but it's quite clear that this is the part not made clear by the Immigration Service, or did they? I'd mentioned earlier, amid an excerpt from the statement by the Immigration Service regarding travel with an expired Nigerian passport, and just below it indicates that travelers should apply for a renewal while in the country, a process that should not last more than 2 weeks. Again, there's various, as people have had different experiences at passport offices across the country. A few weeks ago, the Ministry of Interior released a portal on which Nigerians can very easily apply for their passports or the renewal of such. Question is, though, do you need a valid Nigerian passport to exit the country? If you're a dual citizen of the country and the passport of your country of residence is valid. I tried to get the Nigerian Immigration Service and the Ministry of Interior on this, but got no response. Therefore, I reached out to an international immigration lawyer who incidentally is Nigerian to help proffer some explanation. You'd want to listen to what he says. Joining me now is tax and immigration lawyer Dayo Shotinwa. He is in New York City. Dayo, thank you so much for joining me on Diplomatic Channel.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's start off very quickly, because Nigeria is just one of those countries where citizens are allowed to return to the country with an expired passport. I wanted to get your thoughts on this, what it says about the country and its immigration system.
Generally, it's not a new thing for a country to permit their citizens to return to their country with an expired passport, depending on the circumstances. If I may make reference to even advanced democracies like the United States, as at January 2020 to June 30, 2022, U.S. citizens could return to the United States with an expired passport, although that ended on June 22, 2020. That being said, the main issue there is that considering the backlog of passport applications in Nigeria, considering a lot of challenges in renewals and applications, I think the memo or the letter that emanated from the customs, the immigration service, I think it was a right step in the right direction, because this will allow a lot of Nigerians with expired passports to return freely and seamlessly to their country, which is their home country, as long as they can identify themselves as citizens of Nigeria. Generally, I think in a nutshell, that doesn't have any major impact or any negativity on the immigration system of a country since they're returning to their home country.
No, it doesn't have any negative implications. In fact, according to the memo, you're right. Nigerian citizens outside of the country can return with their expired passports. Of course, this is for a period of time. But when they return to when they return to Nigeria, do they need a valid Nigerian passport to leave the country?
Yes, now that is a good question because now leaving the country, that is another step because then the immigration services, the customs, the airport authorities, law enforcement have to conduct some checks, security backgrounds, and some stringent procedures. So leaving Nigeria to another country, it is advisable that such travelers, either by land, sea, or air, should apply for a new passport or renew their expired passport while in Nigeria before leaving. In most countries that I've observed, you cannot leave their country with an expired passport. So I believe that Nigeria as well should follow that line, whereby travelers leaving Nigeria should renew their passport or apply for a new passport prior to departure from Nigeria.
Well, this memo is not clear when it comes to dual citizenship holders, people who have, two different passports. Because, for example, we know that the system for renewal of passports is a bit it's a pretty lengthy process, an average of 3 weeks at most here in Nigeria. I think the only country where, Nigerian passports are delivered in about 2 or 3 days is in the UK right now, and that's all thanks to the new system that's in place. Other people, Nigerians in other countries are complaining. But when you have a dual citizenship holder, someone who has a Nigerian passport and another country's passport, the country of residence, do you necessarily need a valid Nigerian passport to return to that country? I say this because I watched a vlog recently of a Nigerian who came into the country with her expired Nigerian passport, but then couldn't leave, well, because she had a hiccup with immigration who said that she needed a valid Nigerian passport to leave, but she also had the passport of her country of residence.
Yes, if you have a passport of a country of residence, that means you're a dual citizen. That is permissible by law in Nigeria. Case studies have confirmed that. But that notwithstanding, the foreign passport, that's your dual citizenship. Let's say you're a dual citizen of the United Kingdom or the United States. The passport is not applicable, is not useful until you get to the border of your other residence country. So leaving Nigeria, it is advisable that you renew your passport or apply for a new passport prior to departure. There could be other processes whereby there could be an expeditious way to renew or apply for new passports while in Nigeria. But just going to the airport or going to the seaport or even the land borders with an expired passport. Nigeria is a sovereign country. They have their laws, they have their regulations. They have their own national assembly. So definitely they have to keep their borders as well regulated, well protected, and well secured. So generally, I believe that passengers or travelers that want to leave Nigeria, even though they have dual citizenship, ought to renew their passport if it has expired or apply for a new one if they need to apply for a new one in order to avoid any kind of delays or issues with law enforcement or even with immigration or all that, our customs as it may be.
Yeah, it's a bit confusing, isn't it? Because you have the passport, a legal valid travel document of your country of residence, which is what you need to leave the country. I mean, if you watched her blog, there was a part where the immigration officer was saying, you come with a Nigerian passport, you leave with a Nigerian passport. What if she didn't have the other passport, but she had the other passport? She didn't need a visa to leave the country. So why would she require, I mean, she said for a period of 2 weeks, which was not enough time for her to apply for a Nigerian passport, another one, a renewal. So shouldn't the memo from the immigration service be clearer on this issue? If you're coming with your expired Nigerian passport, you probably need to start the process of renewal before leaving.
Yes, I noticed as well that there was ambiguity in that memo written by the Assistant Controller General of Customs sometime in December 2023. But that being said, prior to that memo, there been an unofficial permission for Nigerians overseas to return to Nigeria with an expired passport. Let's say the former Minister of Internal Affairs, Alhaji Rauf Aregbesola, permitted that, although it was not officially documented. It was recently documented now by this new minister that is there, who has taken a more aggressive approach to clear the backlog of passports. But going back to the main crux of your question, which is they came in with a Nigerian an expired Nigerian passport, and now they want to now exit with an expired Nigerian passport, but they are going to their country of residence.
And they have the passport for that country of residence.
Yes, they do have the passport, but they need to clear immigrations and customs in Nigeria. And the only evidence the immigrations and customs have in Nigeria is that they entered Nigeria with an expired passport. So the U.S. Documentation, that's the U.S. passport or the United Kingdom passport or whatever other country's passport, is really not relevant at that particular point in Nigeria. It becomes relevant when you get to the country of residence. That means when you arrive, your country of residence, the UK, that's when you now bring out your dual citizenship, your other passport. So in Nigeria, in my opinion, I believe the authorities are right. They will require that you have a valid passport that is not expired before departure.
Thank you so much, Dayo Shotinwa, for speaking with us on Diplomatic Channel.
Thank you so much for having me.
Welcome back. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel will not give in to Hamas demands to end fighting and withdraw forces from the Gaza Strip. During his address on Sunday, the Prime Minister said adamantly it would mean surrender to Hamas. This comes as pressure rises within Israel and the international community for the government to reconsider the war, given the humanitarian situation there.
The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was reacting to Hamas' demands to end the fighting in Gaza and withdraw forces from the Strip. Speaking in Hebrew, he told Israelis and the rest of the world, Israel will not agree to Hamas' demands, which would mean surrender. It will continue fighting until all of its objectives are achieved. And while Israel has shown its willingness, Hamas still held to its extreme positions, first and foremost with withdrawal of our forces from the Strip, the conclusion of the war and leaving Hamas intact. The state of Israel is not willing to accept this. The comments came as negotiations to broker a ceasefire and the release of hostages have been ongoing in Cairo. Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh said in a statement that the militant group was keen on reaching a comprehensive ceasefire and accused Netanyahu of sabotaging the talks. The truce proposal is believed to involve a 40-day pause in fighting while hostages are released and the release of a number of Palestinian prisoners being held in Israeli jails. Hamas says it viewed the current proposal in a positive light, but the main sticking point appears to be whether the ceasefire deal will be permanent or temporary. A brief truce late last year saw over 100 Israeli hostages released by Hamas, while Israel has freed around 240 Palestinian prisoners. The deal did not lead to a lasting ceasefire, however, which is reported to be one of Hamas's key demands in the current negotiations. Impatience has been growing in Israel of the release of the hostages, and so have the protests, like this one holding on the streets of Jerusalem. People demanded the government step down and reach a deal to free hostages held in Gaza following talks in Cairo. But Prime Minister Netanyahu has remained persistent with his plan to attack the city of Rafah.
Bibi will give up with Rafah too because the Americans and Europeans will not let him do. But as long as he can declare about Rafah and prevent the kidnapped return, he will do. It will take time till this government is put down and a new one replace it. I hope better one. And then things have chance to move slowly towards settlements and a better future.
They have no mercy for the people in the Otef and in the north of Israel, and they practically don't care about them, and they don't care about bringing back the kidnaps and those who had been killed. And I think they could not continue control or govern the country anymore. The way to change the whole theme, the whole concept, is not by war and not by fighting, because the 2 million children that are living in Gaza today, all what they want is to be Hamas soldiers. And this is what had been done since the 7th of October. Rather than having a perspective, they are killing the situation, and I don't believe that there are almost any more than 20, 30 alive Israeli kidnaps there. It's not that they are captured by the country, like somebody who is in the prison in Egypt or in Syria. It's more like it's a terrorist organization that kidnap people, and they have no system of holding them, and they don't know at all what's happening with them. And these are fractions and fractions of terrorist people, then there's no chance you know where they are.
In recent months, mass protests have been taking place across Israel, where families of hostages and citizens are demanding the government resigns and negotiate for the release of hostages through a truce. Outside of Israel, pro-Palestinian protests are on the rise. Recently, hundreds of people staged a protest in Paris to contest the government's decision to deny the entrance of Palestinian British surgeon Dr. Ghassan Abu Sita, who was supposed to take part in a conference at the French Senate to talk about what he saw in Gaza during his service there in France. In April, the doctor was also invited to speak at the Palestine Congress event in Berlin, but Germany did not allow him entry into the country. Hundreds of pro-Palestinian demonstrators rallied outside the University of Havana in the Cuban capital to voice their support for the people of Gaza. University campuses have become protest grounds as students criticize Israeli activities in Gaza. Students waved the Cuban and Palestinian flags and carried signs indicating their condemnation for the deaths in Gaza. The Cuban government has firmly expressed solidarity with Palestine since the outset of the war in October. During the international meeting of solidarity with Cuba in Havana on Thursday, Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel reaffirmed the nation's support towards the Palestinian people and called on the United Nations to recognize the territory's statehood. Authorities have been clamping down on the protesters, as seen in Germany and the United States. Just outside Berlin's Humboldt University on Friday, police were seen dragging away protesters and making arrests as dozens of pro-Palestine activists staged a sit-in demonstration. The university president, Julia von Blumenthal, got into a heated exchange at the gathering. She called on the protesters to have a conversation. The protest had started out peacefully but turned violent when police intervened and started removing and arresting students. More universities in the United States have been staging protests that authorities have tried to clamp down on. The latest being at the University of Texas. Students denounced the university's administration for calling police officers and state troopers on them for expressing their minds during pro-Palestine protests.
To be intimidated. We will not allow them to pacify us.
In March, Texas Governor Greg Abbott issued an executive order mandating schools to discipline anti-Semitic behavior on university campuses as the Israel-Hamas war continued to inflame tensions among Texas students.
From the sea to the river, Palestine will live forever. Palestine will live forever.
It has been very uncomfortable for Jewish students who say they feel harassed and unsafe. In the meantime, 4 people have been killed in an alleged Israeli airstrike on a house in Mais El Jabal in southern Lebanon. A family living on the property, including a 4-year-old child, was killed in the strike, while 2 others were admitted to hospital. Israel has also closed the Kerem Shalom crossing into Gaza after Hamas fired rockets from within the strip, one of the few routes to get humanitarian aid, including food and medical supplies, into Gaza.
That's the program this week. I hope it's been informative. I look forward to reading your comments and questions on all of the social media handles showing on your screen. You can watch this edition again by logging on to youtube.com/channelsweb. Just go to the playlist and search for Diplomatic Channel. I'm Amarachi Ubani. I'll see you next time.